And ladies and gentlemen, this is it, Strange Communications in the Digital Realm. And today we're kind of gathering together with a few of the people that I have, respected, followed, worked with, been friends with, kind of developed with, activated with, side by side over the past few years. And the really cool reason why we're all gathered here together today is in support of a really awesome event that's coming up. I believe it's August 27th through 30th, called Camp Disclosure in Flat Rock, North Carolina. And what you're going to be seeing here today is just a little bit of a strange kind of round table discussion. If you guys have watched some of the content that I put out before, you'll know we'll probably go some strange places. Many things you hear here may not make sense. I like to say that up front. Just take what you can and file the rest for future reference. But all that said, we are at an incredible energetic window. The version of you that you see here today, the version of you that you see on your screen, that you look at in the mirror when you wake up in the morning, it's not the version of you that you've been. In fact, we've all gone through a tremendous change over the past few years, and we are at one of the greatest choice points right now in the activation of human consciousness. And so this year, in 2020, many of us are going to be gathering all together in the physical realm, in places like Flat Rock, North Carolina, in places like, we could say, Rama, New Mexico, hopefully, other places as well. And so the four members here, we'll start out with Simon Esler. For those of you guys that don't know, Simon Esler has a really cool show called, I believe it's Worlds Within on Edge of Wonder. And Simon's been someone that I've been watching over the past few years and kind of just, viewing and observing the very interesting authenticity of his voice. And like this, there's sort of a true genuineness that I think comes from his heart. And Simon, I've really enjoyed watching like how you've like activated and like stepped into this role as a really amazing speaker. And I'm just really honored to have you here. I will start out by saying I have watched such a tremendous change in you over the past year. And so it's really, really cool to see the success of your show. Alexis as well. I will also mention Miss Alexis Buck of Ascension Diaries. And I think it's also Divine Sovereign Beings now, correct, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
we're
Yeah,
doing
thank you.
both.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I've also watched tremendous things, like such amazing changes like come from you over the past few years. It's sort of like we've been walking this strangely like side by side kind of path through these many versions of ourselves. And so I don't know, I just really honor you being a part of this strange team with everyone. And also Z, Earth Star Healer. For those of you guys that don't know, I think I met Z, I think it was 2016. I believe. And I had an experience with you early on in which you gave me a kind of one of those vocal transmissions that you're doing. And for those of you guys that don't know, it was actually one of the most unique experiences I've ever had. It was as if her voice actually created a fragrance. It had a color. It had an emotional kind of tone. I'm even emotional kind of like talking about it. It was so profound and deep. I believe that it was when I was sitting on the bank of this river in Mount Shasta, just kind of hanging out there the first time we ever met. And it really, it had such a profound effect on me that I really want to thank you for that experience all those years ago. But all that said, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Simon. How are you? Thanks for joining us. What's happening in your world?
Thank you for having me. This is great. I'm doing all right. I am probably like many people moving through the intensity of this portal timeline collision experience. I can say it's been like probably the most challenging and yet the most rewarding in terms of development of self, realization of self, dissolving of self. It's been very interesting coming into contact with some of the deeper parts of like my shadow self that truly, I had no idea. I had no idea were functioning within me. I really had no idea. And so uncovering parts of yourself that you don't expect, I was saying this to you earlier, is really like one of the most humbling things, because then you realize how much room you have to grow into yourself, right? Once you discover these parts of yourself that have been operating sort of incognito, then it's like you breathe into those spaces and you really like bring free will into those spaces of yourself that have been, in this sort of shadowy operating status. So that's really what I've been going through. And I'm coming through an 8-year cycle right now. So 8 years ago, I had a whole series of events with my partner Amanda and a friend of ours that were very like intense and spiritual. And now like we're all coming back around. We're finding all these interesting mirror events occurring and like group clearings naturally arising. So just sort of watching that with as much neutrality as I can has been really, really fascinating. So it's all, I don't know, it's all going to be turned into gifts to share with the community eventually as I distill everything and probably pour it into worlds within eventually. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Oh, thank you. It's been like a crazy, crazy transitional emotional year. Let's hear from
Yeah.
Alexis. How are you? What is happening in your world?
Oh, I'm doing well. I'm glad to be here. I'm feeling pretty even kilter today, emotionally and physically and energetically, which is good. And on my realm of things, watching the Schumann resonance and the solar energy and all that stuff, we're in a specifically like more intense time the last 5 days, I would say, or this being the fifth. So I'm proud of myself for maintaining a decent level and being present and doing good work and tarot readings and staying busy. And it's the call to action to help and be more present and physically help with my abilities as much as I can for anybody who needs it has been very, very strong. So it's been more of a chore even to like really bear down and hold that space for people, because there's so many changes going on, which is why I'm excited to have this talk, because the eclipse windows and everything, all the eclipses happening right now is one of my favorite times, because it's the potential for people to jump into a whole new version of themselves, a whole new version of their life. And it's been fascinating. It's hard to go through, but it's also really fun to watch other people do, knowing that they're going to be okay and offering the help that you can. I've been really grateful to be in that position during this summer, this solstice experience that's coming upon us.
Mm. Yeah, thank you, thank you. How about you, Z?
Yeah, so hi everybody, I'm Z, Earth Star Healer. I work in closest with my seventh dimensional angelic Andromedan aspect, who is a geneticist. So this is the vantage point from which I perceive this multidimensional reality. And for the past 7 years, I have been integrating this part of myself. So I feel that I'm a guide for wanderers and starseeds to remember and integrate their higher dimensional aspects. And I feel that over this past maybe 2-3 months, the main thing that I have been experiencing is just massive integration, where it's like, we can understand and perceive and see all of these multidimensional things, but it's still easy to compartmentalize and choose to navigate certain situations without the multidimensionality and say, well, this is the 3D stuff and this is my multidimensional stuff. And I'm finding that this great merge is happening, which is actually something that I have been forecasting for a few years now. I feel that we hear a lot about timeline bifurcation, where, we see like, oh, all these spiritual people are getting more spiritual and the 3D seems to be getting more crazy. And that was what was happening, and it still appears to be. But I always felt like at some point that bifurcation was going to come back to emerge, because we live in one planet, and this is a big place of integration and awakening that we as a starseed community is going through right now, is finding ways to translate some of this energy that we have and apply it to the masses, or the planet, which is what we came here to transform. And so for me, actually, this just happened yesterday. I have been working on these 2 books simultaneously for like 3-4 years now. It's like the same book and the same intention and the same technology, just written in 2 languages, like one in the words that would be understood by kind of our starseed community, and one that's written in layman language so that everybody can understand. And they're both basically just this desire to help people heal from this great sickness that we're going to be talking about, this mind virus. Very interesting. Had some excellent downloads about that I would love to share later on. But just yesterday, so for the last 3 or 4 years, I've been writing these 2 books, and I just haven't been able to get through the halfway point. And I was thinking that maybe at some point these 2 projects would merge, because it feels like existing almost in 2 places. I'm going to make this one for the Starseed community, and then I'm going to make something else for everybody else. It's because that wasn't fully integrated in me. So just last night, I felt the 2 just like totally implode into one. And this like download came through about how this project is now going to be woven to actually be able to resonate with both people. So this merging is definitely happening here. And just as a side note, I do live inside a Stargate, so everything kind of happens here first. It could be a couple years before we see this energy fully manifest on the planet of this merging, where the starseeds, the ambassadors, were finally ready to actually hold space for mass transformation. And just as a side note, I do feel like that's probably when full disclosure will happen, because it's actually us dictating when it happens. It's just about, having the most peaceful timeline as possible and being ready and not having no foresight and doing things and not recognizing what might happen later. All of those things are spiraling. I'm very excited to be here and to share at this event in Flat Rock at the end of August with all of you.
Oh, rad. Thank you. Thank you. I am also, thank you for diving in on timelines instantly, because that has been one of the primary, I guess we could call, like frequency base, or the modalities, or the place in which a lot of my conscious work has been going, especially with respect to understanding the nature in which we are sort of being corralled. For those that are not aware right now, our consciousness and our energy is being diverted. It's being pulled away into what we call the transhumanist timeline, the additional layers of a multidimensional parasitic control structure that is being reinstituted in a little bit of a new way. And so thank you for going there instantly, because we're going to instantly segue into the question of the moment. For those of you that are watching and know, a lot of my work revolves around, understanding and looking at the parasitic construct and the ways in which we can, activate our own intuitive multidimensional healing abilities. One of the things I've been noticing, and we've also talked about this in other live streams lately, is this diversion of human energy and this conscious stream that we're all tapping into, which for those of you guys who don't know is called fourth density. It's not 5D. We've always been in 5D. What we're having is a transitional experiential process in which we move through this fourth density gateway of what's ultimately many, many lifetimes as a physical being. But right now, since we're beginning that, we're at this critical nexus point with these eclipses and whatnot, and just the shift in our consciousness. I would like you guys, if you can, to comment on the idea that what we're seeing right now is an additional layer of mind virus programming. How does that translate to you? What do you feel about that? And sure, it might be a big mouthful, so take what you can, but what are you doing about it? What can we do about it? And take whatever you can from that. Simon.
Okay, so I had some recent experiences that are really relevant to this. I was studying with a teacher recently. I talk about his work a lot. His name's Lujan Mattis. He's writing a new book, and I was able to study under him for some of the process of him creating this new book. And some of the techniques he was teaching and the concepts were based on timelines. And basically, the way he speaks about it is that we're not looking to manipulate the timeline. What we're actually looking to do is soften it. And I really resonated with this, because part of the pressures of this AI timeline, this artificial timeline, is that they're really looking for solidification of the timeline, right? They want to have it congeal to a point where we're then like sort of trapped in this more solid state timeline. And so in softening and in going into more soft and subtle states of consciousness, what we're actually looking to do is soften it so that there's more room for free will, and also more room for sort of the mysterious aspects of existence to come forward, so that we're not so controlling, right? Because there's an ambition, even within our community to manifest the right timeline, but we need to, in my understanding, step back a little bit of that controlling nature And so that spirit has room as well. So there's not all of us, all of our agendas, all of our ideas trying to force it into a certain way. And instead we're becoming softer in ourselves. And in so doing, we create this softening of the timeline. And to me, this is like the birthing of free will on Earth. And this is actually something I'm going to be going into in a lot more detail in my talk at Camp Disclosure. And that, free will has a very sort of subtle gateway to really come into place on Earth. And I think that's part of what we're doing with all this timeline work, is to really create that subtle gateway for humanity to actually experience free will and what it really means in comparison to what's already sort of destined to happen.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Those are my ideas. That's it.
Oh, no, thank you. Oh, yeah. I was actually just like waiting for Alexis. It looked like you were right about to say something. So, yeah.
Well, I think I agree with that, and for sure. And Jace is always telling me that about the law of one and what they say about control, and how it's more of a service to self-action to try and control where you're going in your timelines as much, and trying to have control over other people and control over where you're going and everything. And to actually release that is it releases you back into like the oneness of everything, and it allows you to become more like the flow and more in the flow with what the timelines and the things are going. And I think you also have the potential for yourself to completely, because we're manifesting out from where our consciousness, in my opinion. So you can actually begin manifesting a whole new timeline just through changing yourself and changing what you want to see and what you pay attention to. So I think what we do in these talks and in this conversation is actually offer people the potential to want and welcome in and soften in a way, like you're saying, to higher timelines and to other opportunities for them that maybe with the mind virus and what we're combating in a way aren't allowing people to do. And I think a lot of people are offering just new opportunities and new pathways and new potentials, instead of us falling into this one narrative that seems to not have our best interest, and it seems to not be as soft, like you were saying. So I really like that.
Thank you. See, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, I think that there is a really interesting thing that I've been experiencing here. We, as a gatekeeper, I kind of watch the timelines come in. And I think there was a period of time in April where I actually went offline to meditate for 10 days. And when I was up there, we were actually making some decisions surrounding things like, what are we going to do with these criminals when they're in jail? Like, are we going to have the death penalty? Are we going to put them in jail their whole life? These discussions were being had. And at the same time, if you can remember, there was, I think this is the 4-4 gateway, there was like that massive meditation. And it was really interesting to watch, because there were some people that were like, yeah, world meditation. And then some other people were like, oh, this thing's organized by like Satan or something. And like, there's just everything in between. And at the same time, I was also seeing just different timeline potentials coming up, like different spiritual teachers or people with followings, like saying different things that had specific dates and similar things like that. And so what I realized was that there are definitely different interdimensional beings with different intentions and agendas. And that, this comes back to what Simon's talking about with the free will, is that humans are actually creator beings, and we're supposed to be divine sovereign creator beings. And so that means that we actually do have the freedom to choose what we're creating. And so when somebody comes up to you and says, okay, this is happening next week, and you're like, oh, wow, and you believe them, you're actually lending your creative energy to that timeline. And I noticed that there were a lot of beings with these different agendas who were trying to get people to subscribe to their reality, basically. And so this really comes down to, the individual person doing the deprogramming work and doing the healing work and the shadow work to find authenticity, so that they're actually expressing as a free sovereign being just vibrationally inside our body, which allows us to then make those sovereign authentic expressions outwards as well. And that is basically what we talk about when we say like living from the heart or softening. It's like we're no longer trying to control things because we already understand that there's this unfolding, and what our soul is deciding to do is kind of like this guidepost. And this came up actually last night because my friend was like, they're like planning a trip, and I was like, I'm not sure if I want to do this. And she was like, well, you do have free will, so you can choose. And then I kind of tuned into my heart to see like how my heart felt. And then when I did that, it made my brain feel like I didn't have free will because I had to follow my heart. So that was an interesting experience.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I definitely feel this sort of free will aspect right now with respect to just the choices and the alignment that I think we're making. And, once again, we're going to bring it all the way back to timelines, because one of the things that I sort of noticed last year, and maybe you guys in this here roundtable can also comment on this, toward the end of last year, I was sort of putting together all these things and all this stuff that I was sort of hatching up and all these plans that I was doing for the coming year. And I had this weird thing where, I would sort of look ahead and I'd be like, I don't know what's going to happen after April. And I was literally talking to my wife and Nora going, I don't know I can't see what's going to happen after April. I have no idea. And I was very concerned about it. I had no idea. And I can tell you that on an internal level, Matthew, did not see what was about to show up. And I think a lot of us, it was like a veil had to be placed over us on some level, because honestly, I think there are, sure, there's a lot of intuitives in the world that forecasted there was going to be a fake, like a pandemic and all this stuff through many different forms of media. But on a personal level, I don't know myself and anyone in this primary soul group that saw what was actually about to take place. And I think it was set up that way for this specific reason, so that each of us in the coming months would go through a very particular type of transformation. And to bring it back to, I think, something that Simon was talking about in the beginning, and probably even before we started this, just the shadow work and just the the amount of just emotional healing that I think everyone has gone through in the past couple months, myself included. I believe, you guys, when we talk about the concept of switching timelines, when we talk about the idea of kind of coalescing and coagulating human consciousness in a natural flowing way toward this organic ascension, it's been my experience that those sort of alignments will take place in my world just on the other side of emotional healing. And so all that said, the big themes for me, and I'm going to be totally vulnerable with everyone here, because I know everyone on this live stream, a lot of you guys have gone through the same thing as well, but during this quarantine period, I had been faced with so much of my own internal darkness, like all of the deepest triggers and the emotional things that I would view in other people on social media or in my own internal world were just reflected back to me on such a shocking level that what it did is it reinforced the idea that our choice and our alignment and our emotional healing is everything at this stage. And so, for me, you guys, it's been a lot of anger. It's been a lot of frustration. It's been a lot of jealousy. It's been a lot of self-comparison. It's been a lot of what we call the imposter syndrome, in which we devalue ourselves. And it's also been a lot of, what I call self-righteous anger. And for those of you guys that are wondering, that's a lot of liver and spleen energy, those of you guys out there. But for those of us in the live stream, and for those of you guys on the panel, how has this period been, this weird shadow period? What comes up for you? Whoever wants to go, probably Simon, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I really agree. It has been all of those things, really emotionally turbulent and very revealing in terms of just really dark, gross stuff that has to come up. It's almost like emotional pustules, like really, just, it's true. All the things that you were judging in others, all these things that you truly weren't able to see yourself doing. And this is so interesting to me because I don't entirely subscribe to the idea that these were unconscious, because when I look back, I'm like, no, there was a level of awareness that I was utilizing in these shadow aspects of myself. So I can't use the unconscious card. To me, that's kind of a cop out. Personally, it's like, if I'm going to take full responsibility when this stuff comes up, it's like, no, part of me was really choosing this, because now I'm going to choose not to do that. Right. because if we subscribe to the notion that this was all unconscious, then it's really hard to take responsibility, and it's very easy then to move into like, oh, what early experiences in my life like put this in me? It wasn't my fault, you know? And I think to really own up to our incarnation and our timeline, then we have to, you know, take ownership of the full incarnation. And so in uncovering that stuff for myself, you know, I think humbling has really just been the best thing, is really seeking practices that help support the cultivation of humbleness. One of the best ones I found is really just when you encounter a form of your own resistance. And I find this helpful, like looking at the shadow aspect as resistance to life itself. And so the way I've been perceiving it is like life itself wants to move through me. And so where am I creating resistance so that life can't move through me? And that's what these shadow aspects represent for me, is spots where I was being given the energy of life, and I was either, you know, entrapping it or warping it or distorting it or blocking it. And so it's about reaching like a level of clarity so that I can just allow life to move through me, and in doing so, be much more present and allow my service to be much less polluted by motives and agendas and, you know, subtle intentions that I'm not really acknowledging that need to be swept away. So that's really been my experience with it.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think it's interesting that it took this particular period of time for you, Matthew, that was the catalyst that caused you to go through these emotions. Because I've been honestly beating myself up for like the last like year and a half, because I've been having a similar experience, but I feel like it started just at a different time. And I'm just now falling out of it, where I'm like finally breaking through, having those breakthroughs with all of the self-inflicted blockages of energy going through my own body. And I've noticed even on a collective level, it's been interesting to watch. And I feel almost we are clearing chakras going up from like the root chakra, which is like our root level safety, which is what really I think has been attacked the most during this whole thing. And like the safety that we on an animal instinctual level even require in order to move to the next chakra, which is like procreating and like moving to the next level of community and self-love and self-actualization, and then up into like the solar plexus, which is again more about the self and how we view ourselves and what we want to give of ourselves. And I feel like I've just had those like chakras just like pummeled in the last like couple of years, and it's just been a lot of processing and watching not only me and the things I've gone through, but my grandparents and my parents and my friends and my family, and all of these weird little subconscious, in a way, programs that are in there about how things are supposed to work. But the beauty of the transformation we're seeing is that all of those lies and those things that are blocking the flow are falling away. But even parts of me are holding on to them like as hard as I can, because that's what I think is safe for me and my like subconscious programming. But it's like, that is not the template we're working with anymore. And we had to move through all that stuff so you can go back into the heart, in my opinion, and actually be a good community member and love everyone equally, and an awareness that you're all on the same team, basically. So I thought I had gotten to that point already, and then it was like I got knocked all the way back down again and had to restart. But I'm glad that happened, because I learned so much. And now I feel more confident in myself, which is really cool. And I'm just glad to be here for other people who are now, I'm watching, going through that same process and having anything to say, to offer of support and positivity and even laughter during these times that are really, really hard for my loved ones. It's just been a blessing. So I'm glad that I went through it, and that I'm going through it with everyone else. And I think it's also a big part of the community as well, like working through our vulnerabilities together.
Feel you. Thank you, Z. I'd love to get your reaction.
Hearts. So, what Simon was saying earlier reminded me of this download I had in the shower the other day. where I realized, okay, this is like kind of a conspiracy theory. Or not a conspiracy theory, it's just
Perfect.
a theory. It's a theory that I
Yeah.
realized. So my theory is that there's actually no such thing as the subconscious, and that it's actually a psyop. Because I feel like the psychologists or whatever, the old bearded men who decided they were going to define society without the divine, I think that they make this concept up so that we grow up in a reality where we believe that we don't know who we are. And that's like the amnesia part of the mind control, the mind virus. And so basically that's like, and I feel like it was all conscious. And when we look around in the world, like this is part of the integration. It's like, you know, this is how the CIA has kind of done their job with calling these things conspiracy theories, because even if you are a truther, like there might still be a part of you that doesn't fully believe what, you know, what you believe in, simply because it's like your intuition might feel like something is true, but then the rest of your body might not be integrated enough to formulate the solutions for those issues. And that's why a lot of people just kind of like post news articles and repeat things, because they're not actually fully integrated in their own creative system to actually begin to come up with authentic thoughts to create solutions for those issues. And so it's very clever that, you know, these people of power are telling us that there's this, you know, 90%. You ever seen that picture of the iceberg where it's like, we're only aware of this little thing? And usually that's like our body. Our body is really our subconscious. We carry thoughts and traumas and like all these different places in our body, and also, you know, receive different energies and dimensional information from our body as well. And so if we begin to work with that, we're actually beginning to peel away this mind virus thing. And when we look at the world, it's really not outrageous that there's something very eerily wrong that have been kind of controlling the masses for a long time. You know, it's not like people don't know this on some level. Like even my mom, she's like totally asleep, but when I talk to her about the stuff, she's like, look, Z, like I just have my head in the sand. Like that's just where I'm choosing to be, because yeah, like it's too scary to face. It just seems like there's this giant thing, and we're just like these tiny insects that are like in a sandbox or something. I work with this concept called proactive self-healing. This is basically what my work is based around, is all of these internal healing modalities and capabilities of our body to basically come into homeostasis and to clear those viruses. I have been writing about this in the two different languages, and I feel like it's coming together. And this again actually relates to something that I really like that Simon, you said about when we have resistance to life. So I feel like the simplest way to look at all of this is that basically anti-life is what people say is satanic. When we see like extreme rituals, that's just them taking it to way extremes. But we basically live in kind of a satanic society, like the modern world. And what that is just being anti-life, right? We've been all programmed to basically live life in a way that doesn't really honor or revere or have appreciation for it. And then there's this programming that then says, well, you have to be afraid of dying because, you know, there's nothing else afterwards, or we just don't know. And that like life and death is just something that is so mysterious and scary to us, mostly because our society, we've just not lived in a way where there are rituals and rites of growth for us. So, you know, people are very protected. You know, people have funerals where their deceased ones get sent off to get cremated or dressed up before you even go there to see the body. Or, you know, in the hospital, you get numbing agents to give birth to your babies. Like, we're very afraid of discomfort and pain because we, as a society, have lost our connection to those rites of growth and passage. So we've never experienced discomfort and pain and facing, you know, death in a way that's very straight up. So all of this, again, is just part of our programming of this satanic reality that we've grown up in. And so this idea of proactive healing is that you can actually be ahead of the triggers. if we just did our practice for about 3 to 4 hours a day, then we can actually go through that processing before it manifests in our life as a subconscious or trigger for us to heal it, because we've already healed it like yesterday ahead of time. And that's a very interesting thing that I think, you know, as a light worker, it's the most not glorious thing, but the most important thing to be doing.
I feel you. Thank you. I'm excited to hear more about this thing that you're building as well. That's very very interesting. I would say from my own perspective, I guess we'll say, for those of you guys that don't know, and once again, I will say hello to everyone on the live stream. We got almost 100 people here hanging out with us. So hello, everyone. I see your comments. We're going to be looking at some of your questions as well. For those of you guys that have questions, if you want to ask about any of the strange multi-dimensional happenings in our world, feel free to throw it in the chat. But however, all that said, I feel like we're at such an opportunistic point with respect to these pockets of emotional healing, whether it be self-identity, whether it be, as I segue into the next subject here, a thing that many of us, or I should say I call mission stage activation. A stage of the physical incarnation in which we've gone through a series of events or experiences, healings, realizations, or what is ultimately knowledge of self, to the extent that we are able to then take what we've internalized or integrated in those processes and then begin bringing it outward to the world. One of the things I've noticed over the past year in myself, and you know, ultimately why all four of us are here and many others, is that we are coming to this stage as a multidimensional soul group in which each of those members that are going through that process are now offering it out to the world. Some of us in the form of healing modalities, like Z and I are in the process of, you know, doing in our own world, in the form of, you know, like the activism and the healing work and all the stuff that Simon's doing, and especially Alexis as well, with all of your work and the space weather and all that stuff. Each of us have this sort of niche, but what we're seeing is within the larger like community, we have this whole soul group of millions and millions of star seeds who are now activating into that thing, their own thing. And there's lots of questions, there's lots of changes, there's actual specific things that will activate in the human body. And so with respect to what I call mission stage activation, how has that process been for you guys? And here's the big question. How can all those people that will see this live stream, how can they step into their own next assignment, or that next version of themselves, or that next ability? Take whatever you can from that, Simon.
Okay. Well, I want to come back to something that was said, which is basically, you know, this idea of the subconscious. You were talking about how, you know, this idea that there is no subconscious, and I think it relates to one big thing that we all need to be doing in this mission stage activation, which is really, you know, that stepping into the full self and everything that we need to be doing and everything that we need to be acknowledging in ourselves. So for me, this process relates really strongly to that idea that we have this resistance to life itself. And G, you were saying about, I'm trying to remember how you worded it, but it had to do with just avoiding discomfort and avoiding death and birth, and how those, you know, we constantly are trying to dodge those aspects of our experience. And I've noticed, you know, there's kind of like a meditation bias that spiritual communities have developed, where it's like meditation is about sitting and gathering pleasure, and gathering a pleasurable experience. And truly, I think there's work to be done here in learning to watch your own heart when it's in great discomfort, great turmoil, when it's in resistance, or when your heart's in like a very sort of ugly state, like, or what you may judge as ugly, whatever that may be. But it's this idea of being able to be fully present with those sort of violent internal struggles in the same way that we're present in like our most beautiful meditations, you know, when we feel clear and open. And so, you know, I think this has to do with something that I'm very focused on with this new season of Worlds Within that I'm developing, because I really see this divide between people's practice at home and the states they're entering in their private practices, but then their behavior as they're out in communities advocating for truth. And there's a lot of disconnect there. Like I see a lot of sort of violent forms of communication and a lot of sort of projected anger and just projections in general. And so I'm really interested in why people can reach such high states of consciousness in their private work, and why they can't then go and apply that to like a debate or some moment of activism in this great awakening. It's a very difficult bridge, I think, for a lot of people to connect to. And I think that has to do with this meditation bias that to do the right thing, I should probably feel really good. And sometimes you might not feel good, and you still have to be focused on doing the right thing and behaving in ways that are of service. So, you know, I think my experience of this has been learning to meditate and to fall into deeper and deeper states, regardless of discomfort of the shadow arising. And that's what the shadow work has really brought up for me. You know, it's called out my bullshit and all the stuff, my biases that, you know, really have not been jiving, where I can go and do certain personal work that's very subtle and very beautiful and very clear. But then it is sometimes a struggle to fully bring that into the world. And I think that also relates to something you were saying, G, about how like there's something occurring here where instead of that bifurcation, we're actually finding a reunification. And I think part of that is the bridging of these two things. Of all the people in the world that have been privately practicing and doing all this incredible work in states of being, and that's coming together with states of doing. And it's like a true merger of that. And so I think we need to be more ambitious about taking our private light work and truly authentically applying it to all of our interactions, and really taking responsibility for every interaction on the level that we do when we're in like the depths of meditation or prayer. So I'm very interested in bridging that. And I really, you know, invite people to test that out. You know, look at the difference in your body when you've come out of a very clear meditation and what it feels like in your body versus when you're in the depths of, let's say, like a really tense Facebook debate about, I don't know, secret space programs or Donald Trump or whatever. The point is when you watch your body and the discomfort that arises in those interactions, can you apply that same sort of soft, non-judgmental awareness to those internal experiences that you do when, you know, you're blissed out? And yeah, that would be my invitation
here.
Yeah, please go.
So what makes me think, what I think of when you say that is this concept that I work with, imagining that there is a star part of me and an earth part of me. So most wanderers or starseeds, or people who are incarnate, who are, you know, older on a soul level, who have acquired more spiritual knowledge in previous lifetimes. I think that when we awaken, we start activating and connecting to those parts of ourselves. And those parts of ourselves feel good because they feel like unconditional love. They feel like expansion. You're like, I want more of that. And this is where the, hang on, I think somebody's using the blender.
I don't think we can hear it. Don't worry. It's all good.
Yeah. So, but what we're doing is neglecting the earth self. And the earth self is actually basically the ancestral part of ourself, the very earth-based physical part of ourself that a lot of us as angelics or starseeds, many of us have not experienced being in a physical body that much. So being in this density is really hard. And we've just never like experienced how slow things are. And this integration of kind of, I think of it as a walk-in process, really, of this higher part of ourselves walking into our body. And that is the process of us ascending as well, because our bodies are losing density to meet with a higher aspect of ourself that is resonating or vibrating at a higher density or energetic state. And so that is pretty much what the shadow work is bringing together the earth and the star aspects of ourself.
I like that.
I like it too. And when it comes to like your question, Matthew, with bringing people who are now awakening even to their star self and or their earth self, what is it that, you know, you've found that helps people bridge that gap the best? I would say that's what I'm wondering. That's what I've been pondering, because with the people I work with, people tend to come to me when there is a space phenomena going on, or like a solar phenomena, which is, in my opinion, a part of the grand shifting, like the star and the earth interacting and making those bridges and building and shifting that relationship. And it's been really cool to have people all of a sudden tell me about all of their times of astral projection and times of great bliss, and then times of great like fear, and they're not really sure what their body's doing right now, and they're not even sure if it's ever going to be the same again. And it's been such a constant, I would say almost like an amusement park, like of people and all the different types of ways that you can activate and become more aware of yourself from your star self or your earth self, and all the aspects of what that includes. And there's so much to cover. And I think it's really cool that I've met a lot of people who resonate with this and resonate with what this awakening kind of is, and then have also moved to the point of also teaching and helping and guiding and bringing it into a lexicon and like a language, like you were doing with all 2 different books even. And now it's like, okay, we need some words and we need some references. And my brain was like, I need some charts, I need some graphs, I need some times, I need to know how I can navigate all that's going on, because there's so much happening at once. But it's always happening like that, in my opinion too. There's always so much going on, but I think the intensity of it is going up, and that's why I love what I do so much and do the blog Ascension Diaries so commonly, because it's like there's so much going on I have to keep up, and new people are awakening every day, and it's like you need a resource and something to look at to be like, wow, I'm actually not going crazy. Don't send me to the psych ward. I think it's going to be better tomorrow. Like even just in a 24-hour span, people have a whole episode, and I've worked with people through these episodes multiple times, and I just can't wait to see what's going to continue happening, because there's people with superpowers and abilities that I've never even known existed who are reaching out to me and being like, help me. And I'm like, I don't know how to help you because I can't do that, but here's some evidence on how you can help yourself. And I think that's what I've been trying to gain the most, is offering things that can empower people back to their own process, instead of reaching out to others who they think have it figured out. Because we, in my opinion, we don't have it all figured out either, and we're still working on it, and giving that, taking off the pedestal and removing the pyramid of the whole thing, and going into the age of Aquarius, where we are more equals and we are just amongst our peers. And I'm really excited to keep helping people through that process, and myself as well, because there is a lot of activations going on. People and doing things I've never seen, and I just can't wait. I can't wait to see and help more people, and in return they teach me something every time.
Yeah, thank you. We're also gonna segue into one of the questions just a moment. And what's weird is I had a really good comment already loaded for this really cool thing that I wanted to move into, and as soon as you're about to say it, it like delete and it's gone. So we're gonna go right into the question. All that said, and this is from Jace, and yeah, I'm just gonna go right back to timelines, because Jace asked, do you guys think there will be a timeline split between the new Earth and the old, or rather, the old will cease to exist in the moment the new is fully anchored? This is just Matthew's theory about this, so I want everybody to take it with a grain of salt. I believe that physical timeline shift that we were all talking about, it already took place. It's literally already happened. But in this 4th density experiential realm, we have to go through this weird integration and tuning process, and everyone's physical bodies will have to go through this alignment and clearing and all these interesting transitions and activations, which is actually the timeline bifurcation process. It takes place within us. This is just my viewpoint within this activation and this awakening of all these frequencies, and what is ultimately, for everybody that's watching, you guys have heard me ramble about this before, an additional layer of each and everything, every single interaction. And so, you know, I think it's already happened. That's just sort of my viewpoint. But at the same time, we are also going through an additional process in which we are going through these sort of like gateways and these sort of movements, and our sort of group, or this sort of monad, or this soul group, we're all transitioning at the same time through different physical versions of ourselves, through different physical actual realms. For those of you guys that wake up in the morning and walk outside and you're like, whoa, it's different, but I don't know how. That's a really good example of that stuff. And so this timeline shifting, in my opinion, is so multi-leveled on so many different levels that it goes back to something Alexis was saying, which, you know, for those of us that work with non-physical energy, myself and Z and Alexis and Simon and pretty much, you know, really everyone on earth at this point, whether we know it or not, the reality is, you guys, we're all figuring this out at the same time. There really are no true experts in this. Every single person, no matter of what we're disseminating or teaching, it's just our own little view under the crack of the door. I mean, literally, it's like I'm looking under there and I'm like, I see the toe, you know, and you're looking over there and you're like, I see part of somebody's shoe or a foot and I see an arm. And, you know, we're little by little, piece by piece, we're starting to kind of understand this stuff. I have this feeling that in the coming months and years, we're going to be like, my Lord, we had it all wrong. But all that said, right? One of you guys, whoever, comment on this physicality of this timeline shift in the spirit of Jace's question. What comes up for you? Whoever wants to go.
Can I go? Can I go? So this kind of reflects with what I was saying earlier about how different parts of our body actually picks up different information. And if we think about the different chakras, time exists actually in different intervals in every vibratory state that we experience. So for a lot of us that come from a higher place, we think like, oh, the new earth, it's happening, it's already here, it's tomorrow. So like we get this like really fast energy. I'm like, okay, we have to like make this video and create the center and make this money. And it just feels like really fast because it's all happening at the same time. And that's where the grounding and connecting with the earth stuff, why that's really important, because in the physical reality, things actually grow very slowly. We learn this if we go and sit in nature. You know, we don't just plant a tree and expect it to grow tomorrow. That forest grew over a very long period of time. Evolution literally took billions of years for us to even, you know, develop into this. And I think that actually as a cosmic infinite being, we take delight in how long things take because we know that there's infinity. So why would we want to rush through anything? We want to like enjoy every little moment. And so, you know, I think that it would actually be a great shame and that we would miss out on what our souls came to Earth to learn if we just instantly manifested New Earth and bypassed, you know, all of these human feelings that we actually came here to feel. So I think with that being said, then moving into the lower chakras and really going through all of that and anchoring in, we really start to see time begin to slow down. And that only in that place can we actually see how the organic timeline in our physical existence is unrolling, is when we actually really get super slow and steady and present in that moment. And we're like, oh, so this is where the next leaf is growing. This is where the next branch is growing. Here's the next blade of grass, you know. And I think that's all the most interesting stuff.
Do you want to go, Alexis?
No. I can
okay.
if you want. I am always good for that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have to say straight up, I mean, I don't know. I don't claim to know. I have no friggin' idea, honestly, what's going to happen. But where I have felt the most tension in my contemplations of this is this notion that as individuals, we have timelines, but then we also have the collective timeline. And that's where like I'm sort of struggling to reconcile like the relationship of is that, you know, you can really be in a timeline that's extremely unique and quite an alternate timeline in comparison to the people around you. I mean, this is already happening in such a weird way. You can literally be living your life and it's so totally, the quality of the reality is so different to literally the person that is walking right next to you. So we have this phenomenon of singular timelines that's already like full force to me. And so that's part of what's driving everyone into this inner work so deeply, because they're encountering their own timeline in such a real way. And they're starting to notice the qualitative difference between the life they're living and the life that other people are living. So that is, I think, one factor to consider. But then, of course, we also have the momentum of the collective and the collective consciousness and the timeline that this human collective is on. And that kind of brings us back to this idea of the sort of psyop that there is this subconscious that we just, you know, don't have access to, this whole part of ourself that's like running the show. And I think that's very relevant in terms of the collective realization of a timeline. That, getting away from this idea that the human collective has a whole sort of subconscious pool of trauma that we can't access. I mean, I just want to call bullshit on that and say that we have the ability to access the full consciousness. It's available to us if we can get past that illusion. And so, there's I guess a reconciling here of how many individual timelines will come into that realization of their participation in the collective, their responsibility in the collective. And I think that on these little individual levels is really going to steer the collective timeline, and I guess generate the relationship between all these individual timelines and what's happening for the collective. And, you hear this theory a lot that there's a certain threshold that if humanity reaches a certain threshold in consciousness, like just enough of us, it's often talked about as just like 1%. If 1% of humanity can reach this critical threshold, there will be this sort of cascade of awareness that comes through. And I do really stand by that idea. And I think that has to do with the revelation of what we have assumed is the collective unconscious and is really just our shared awareness. So I don't know if that really answers it, but that's where my mind's at on all of that.
Can I just kind of pick you off back for a real quick? I lost my thought. Damn it. It was really good.
I know, I love it, right? It happens as soon as you're about to say it, right? You're like, oh yeah, totally.
Damn it. It'll come back if it's important.
Okay.
It's all good. No, thank you, Alexis. Do you have any like commentary on that? Sorry, we kind of like put you on the spot on that one.
Well, it's okay. I live with the person who made that question anyway. So we've had this discussion.
He always talks about it. Oh my God, right? Or maybe the opposite. Sorry.
And yeah, I don't know. I say the same thing. I'm like, I don't know exactly. I don't see it as that easy. I don't see it as that basic in a way, but maybe it is. But for right now, like you were saying, even with like your ability to foresee the future and see what's going on, I've watched, again, so many things happen in the time that I've really, really, really been watching on a cosmic level playing out on Earth. I'm like, there's so many timelines and there's so many convergences and there's so many, more points where like the 1% hits a certain peak and then, it cascades over the earth. And I've felt it like through my own body. And I'm wondering is this just like going to be a constant thing? Is this going to constantly happen? And I think that makes the most sense to me. And that makes most sense to like being in the present moment and approaching everything that hits you right in the face, just with what you got. And that's just, then you end up on a different timeline depending on where you're at and how you approach that thing. And I've had to almost simplify my life and simplify how I approach my wanting to help the collective go into a better place just by having to deal with things more on a moment to moment basis. And then I do still get to have those moments of astonishment where I see the world shift and something just immediately happens. And I'm like, yeah, I have a feeling that I took part in placing that order and now it's coming back to me. And I think it's also teaching us how we manifest and how we're manifesting this world. And we're really getting to choose, and we are the creator beings here. And there's more to the mystery, I think, and what we don't know. And it's just been so much fun. And I'm putting less pressure on myself to like save the world and as much, because I realized how much work I have to do on myself, which has been great.
Yeah, thank you. We're also going to shift gears. We're going to shift into a 3D question. We're going to get out of like the timeline realm. We're going to get out of the non-physical, completely theoretical and undemonstratable realm of non-physical energy. And let's move over into 3D. Let's go back into the physical realm. For a lot of us out there, and this was a question that came through. I do not remember your name. I think it was Luciana, but she was asking a question about how a lot of us right now, with respect to this whole mind virus programming and the fear and hypervigilance and the control structure that's being reinserted over everyone, we have loved ones, we have friends and family. We have all seen the extreme polarization and the I'm just going to block you, boom, or you're now my enemy. We've seen that polarization take place on so many different levels. Now, in tying it back to some of the events and the physical gatherings that we're all going to be at this year, how are you guys dealing with this idea or the programming or the negativity from your loved ones and your friends and family members that say, guys, you have to be afraid. You must be afraid. How are you guys dealing with that?
Well, that's definitely been a source of anger, for sure. You know, it's humbling, I guess. It comes back to it being humbling, because then I see, you know, I see a lot of that going on with this whole, you know, pandemic narrative and all that stuff, and people being like, God damn it, wear your mask, like just being so aggressive and rude.
Disrespectful, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And really like very pushy, I guess. And very like wanting to decide when someone else should have a particular realization. But then I go back and I look and like, okay, well, what have we been doing this whole time? You know what I mean? Like we've been trying to, and there's some validity to promoting suppressed information and trying to unveil spiritual teachings that have been hidden. Like that is good work, but it has made me notice that in myself and just in some of the community work that's going on, that there is kind of a forcefulness in terms of when people should have certain realizations about what's going on in the world. And really it doesn't work that way, you know? So there's been a mirroring there, you know. I think a lot of people who are like good-hearted people stuck in this sort of mind virus, they really feel like what they're promoting, let's say with masks or something like that, they really feel like they're being of service to their community. They see what's going on. They're like, I want to create safety in my community. I'm going to do the right thing. So how often is that good-heartedness then just coming across as control issues? And, you know, I really think that's rampant. And I say that only from unveiling parts of that in myself and realizing that so much more of this has to be about softening, about a much, much deeper presence, especially with those with whom you're engaging. If you're engaging with a family member and it's super heated and it's like all aggressive, like you can soften. You can soften and step back from any desire to control their awakening process. And this is one of the tough things about being in the position that we're in, let's say like communities that have come across suppressed information earlier than the rest of humanity, that have been carriers for spiritual teachings that are just now becoming available to the rest of humanity. And the feeling that has created, the restlessness that has created for a lot of us, is this feeling of like, just take the information, take the realizations, like have them now, you know, because we feel very intense and excited, but there's also a level of control there that I think needs to soften. So yeah, that sort of, it comes back to some of what I was saying earlier, but I do think there's a big aspect of learning to operate with softness and specifically with subtlety. I think subtle states of consciousness, I think the path of subtle energy, I really think that's an actual direction that we're going. I think we're literally as a collective moving towards subtlety, more subtle states of existence, subtle states of creation, and that we've been in this sort of satanic, anti-life, aggressively materialistic reality that's been all about gross, overt forms of expression and very sort of base, very physical. And so I really think the movement towards subtlety is very, very important, and that that's a big remedy for this desire to control the awakening of others. And, you know, that's, yeah, I mean, I think that we got to watch for the mirrors and in those people in our families and communities that are triggering us from that perspective.
I feel you. And yeah, no, thank you. And if anyone else wants to comment on that, Z or Alexis, please do. Otherwise, we're going to take a really fun question that we just saw pop up. Go ahead, anybody. No? Okay, cool. All right. I'm just gonna drop it. Cool. We're gonna segue. Thank you, Mike Patterson. I really, really love this question. Mike Patterson says, this is for whoever wants to answer this. Here's a random question. I've been watching a German series on Netflix about time travel called Dark. Every time I watch it, I get downloads when I go to sleep after watching it. Considering that a lot of content on Netflix is negative, do you think what I'm perceiving as downloads might not be a good thing in the long run? I love that question, and I'm actually going to turn it over to you guys because I have some ideas about that, but I would like to get your reactions on that. Whoever wants to take it.
So I actually had an experience that kind of inspired this thought this morning because we had a plant medicine ceremony last night, and then one of my roommates kind of just had weird thoughts afterwards. She thought it was broadcasts from a some sort of cell tower or something. And the thought that I thought was that every opportunity that we get as a consciousness to respond to something is actually how we grow. So as multidimensional beings, as beings who access psychic information, it's actually really important how we perceive and respond. And so while there are parts of us that might be scared, oh, there's something out to get me, or something can attack me, or something can mind control me, the ultimate truth is that you're actually a divine creator being. And if you were to just step forward into that presence, then you can say, okay, well, what is this really? And that gives you the space to actually explore with inquisitiveness what that is, without the fear that something is going to hurt you or distort you in some way. Yeah, that's
I would say that, sometimes, the name of that particular series is very funny because it's very starkly, in a way, could be put in the negative category, but there isn't anything wrong with darkness as well. It's a part of both sides of the coin of this whole experience. And what you're being led to watch, what you're being led to engage with is also, in my opinion, very important. And it seems to be having its own intelligence more and more. So with myself and my friends and family, what is coming to you really is meant for you to interact with. So if you're getting downloads from this, what is it that you're interpreting? What is it that you're learning? What is it that you're capturing of yourself back? What is it that you want to talk about now? What is it that you want to research now? Sure, what you're being left to find is not something that you can't handle as well. And I feel like there is a divinity towards where we get put and where we get placed and what we're looking at. And you could be the person who is exactly who needed to hear this information to unlock something, and then boom, who knows, something incredible will happen that's totally unrelated, but it's like the butterfly effect. So having confidence in what you're being introduced to and what you're feeling guided to go look at, but with that level of discernment and that embodiment like Z was talking about, where you know that you're safe and you do have the choice to not watch again or something like that. I think that it helps to take away the scariness of it, ooh, something's going to get me and it's going to do something bad that is irreversible, because I don't think that that's possible. And I would encourage, again, to have confidence in that and share as well what you're getting from that. I want to know more about what you're learning from this. I don't even know what the show's about, but it is German. Yeah. So
it's I gotta say, that's a great show. I love that show. It was so good. It was so good because it deals with all these intersecting timelines emerging from one crux point, that there's basically all these timelines intersecting, and there's a portal. And so you have people who have been traveling through it, all affecting each other's timelines in this really incredible web of events. It's really a beautiful show. I think people in this community would love it if they haven't seen it. Yeah. It's really good. But I actually had an experience with this show as well. I actually found it very, very opening. It really opened my heart. I wept at parts of that show. And really part of it had to do with timelines. Wow. It was reconciling the suffering that has come about from all this timeline confusion, and us trying to sort out our past, our present, and our future, and the way they all coalesce. And really what that means. And you can look at that in so many ways, right? If we're looking at this, even just from an ancestral perspective, and the fact of the Great Awakening coalescing all this ancestral karma and all the things that all our ancestors were working on spiritually and moving humanity step by step, it's very, very large and it's very beautiful. So that was part of what that show tapped me into. I really found it quite uplifting and quite opening and heavy at the same time. So I would say that just from my personal experience. And then, yeah, in terms of like whether or not something is sort of infiltrating us, you know, I think there's just a lot of sentiment like that in the spiritual communities that exist that really just comes from spiritual superstition that has arisen from incomplete teachings, you know, from just like incomplete teachings being passed on, and the way that affects people. And so the part of it that should be there in the spiritual teaching then sort of arises within us as it can arise as superstition or insecurity. So you know, I think part of this is stepping into our power and allowing what's in front of us to be of service to us. You know, there's an allowing there that's very important, and sometimes that interaction means engaging something directly and working with it, but sometimes it is just withdrawal and observation. And so we always have that choice of either fully engaging or withdrawing. And I think people need to remember that withdrawal is a valid, honorable form of service in the right circumstances. And the last thing I want to say is that, you know, what helped me sort of sort through the meaning of different media contents was the concept of synchromysticism. And really, there's some really interesting work out there. There's like synchromystic bloggers who go through mass media and they pull out the archetypes and they talk about how the human collective is speaking to everyone through these mass media archetypes. Yes. And what you can draw from that. And so I would invite anyone who has an interest in the way media is affecting you to learn about the synchromystic perspective, because it's very edifying and very supportive.
Oh, thank you.
I didn't know that had a name, but I'm glad that I know it now.
Yeah, that's literally the first time I've heard that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
It's so interesting. I want to say really quickly, what's more really cool that people should know about this is that they actually pick certain actors and they'll track an actor's career and they'll see the archetypes and symbols that have surrounded specific actors no matter what movie they're in, and talk about how that actor is a channel for specific archetypal teachings.
Wow.
Crazy.
Oh, I love that.
Anyways, go on. Sorry.
Oh, no, it's all good. I will mention one thing in response to Mike Patterson's question, because this is actually a thing that people, not necessarily, you know, the content of television shows, but I have actually observed a process in my own working with the clients that I have worked with, which is kind of like a multi-level download and a triggering process that'll take place with certain types of programming on TV. I personally am, for some reason, unable to watch television on any level, you guys. I just can't, so I totally miss out on all this stuff. It has a really, it's very difficult for me to physically even be in the room with the TV, which is an interesting thing. All that said, I believe in what I've noticed is there is a very interesting download and consciousness seeding process that I think seems to be taking place with respect to certain types of TV shows, in which there's like another layer of like a projection that will be shown into the body. And what we're finding it is, on one level, it will correspond with actual experiences or timelines, or we could even say past life stuff that the viewer themselves have experienced that are in resonance with the subject matter that's being shown in the television show. And what happens is there's sort of like a mixing process that will take place, in which the artificial or non-organic frequency that's kind of transmitting this storyline gets mixed in with our own. And for some individuals, I know I have seen this literally with clients, they'll get pulled into some kind of secret space program timeline that is completely constructed out of their own inner sort of like a projection. Now, that said, those are also legitimate past life experiences, but I think it's important to note the negative quality or the potentially negative quality of that download, Mike, because I think at the same time, there is a additional layer of frequency interference that is being broadcasted through those television shows that is also part of the timeline diversion process, in which your own internal experiences are actually being reinterpreted through the lens of a very similar yet with a different vibration. Those, I guess what I'm saying is, you will have both a real and also artificially created internal experience. And so that might have been a very jumbled up way to explain that, but where does that come from in the brain, you guys? I think a lot of it has to do with just the overall frequency buildup that we're getting from actual technology, which, you know, once again goes into the AI stuff, but I'll go on a weird rant about that. That's for later. That said, Z, did you want to comment on any of that stuff?
Yeah, just back to what is like relevant with I think this gathering, what's special about it is that I feel like we're really having this focus on activating each other and like bringing us into a place where we're being very practical and efficient beings and intelligent and integrated and grounded. So we're actually here to like hands in the dirt. Like for example, some of the projects like that I've been thinking about is how to um, decolonize these spaces that we're in, like in our local reality. So there's a really cool monument beside where I live. And, you know, even Chaco Canyon, that's like kind of a famous place that people love going to. Well, even the last time I went there, I was there um, just by synchronicity on Columbus Day. I didn't know it was Columbus Day. I just like ended up there on that day. And I just cried like the whole time I was there because there's all of these, you know, tourists, a lot of them were white, and they were like, oh, I wonder how these people disappeared. And like, they were reading the little plaques about like when the colonizers came. And I'm just like, it's 2020. Like, we don't have to be perpetuating these lies. And like, we're, you know, coming of age to really start to transform those things. And there's literally nothing. I feel like there's this like popping of the bubble. I feel like the new age community has really been this like starseed nursery. And now the nursery has these like fully blossom plants, and we're like, okay, like what are we actually here to do? Like, let's go out into the world and experience it and perceive it with our own eyes and come up with our own creative solutions to transform things for the better, like where we are on the ground. And I think that that's why this gathering is really special, because we're really all just here to provide you with the skills and the techniques and the information that has helped us integrate to the place that we are now, to be embodied and to be grounded. Like, this is like a lifetime of creative exploration. So I'm like at the beginning stage of that, just as we all are. And, you know, there has been many tools that I've found along the way that have been really helpful to get me to this integrated place that we're in. And so I know that, you know, for example, one thing that has always kind of bothered me at other conferences and similar events is that there's this like hero worshiping or like the celebrity, like hoo-ha. And that's just like
Thank you.
something that we inherited from the false matrix. You know, we grew up watching American Idol. We're like, oh my God, like this person who's really an asshole, like he has so much money, you know, like I look up to him. And we're like, that's just like how we've been trained. And so so as we come together, like those programs and ways that we have always been, like they're not just all of a sudden gone, they're still there. So we can actually become aware and talk about these things openly. So we're like, okay, like that's actually not that cool. Like that's actually not something that I want to do. Like, how about we create something different that has an entirely different focus? And I think that this is a very cool collaborative space, and the space is really created and designed for all of us to step into sovereignty and responsibility and joy and co-creation. That's what it's all about.
Thank you. And we are also, with that, we're going to transition back into the original spirit of this whole weird live stream, you guys. One of the reasons why we're doing this thing here today, one of the reasons why we're kind of rambling off and talking about our stuff in our own little particular frequency, is because each and every one of the people here, we're going to be gathering together at Camp Disclosure this year, August 27th through 30th. And so that said, if we can, I would like to hear from everybody here, and I'll go ahead and go last, but what are you guys bringing? What's your role? What are you doing at Camp Disclosure? And what do you think people need to know about it? Let's start with Alexis, if you don't mind, because you're at the top of my screen.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Great. Well, this year at Camp Disclosure, I'm going to be doing something new that I haven't done. And it's basically we're going to attempt to host a smaller version of a gathering and of, you know, an awakening and activating sort of workshops and so on with the earth and with artwork and with each other and with discussion with children. And the children who are going to be accompanying, probably the adults who are going to be joining and watching the other lectures and joining the other workshops. I'm going to be working with the children, and we're going to be creating artwork in nature without like disturbing nature, and creating little things for each one of the kids can have their own little a little display, and we're going to try and show the adults everything that we've created, and we're going to be doing music, and we're going to have discussions, and we're going to be playing games. And I'm just really excited to work with the young masters who are showing up on the planet right now, because so many of us have been hearing about them, and I'm excited now that all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's time, and I've been waiting for this moment in a way to engage and allow an open space, in a way to open the space for them to actually show me what they got, and show me what they've already brought and what they're already working with, because I think it's going to be very fascinating, and also give me a way better idea of what we can do in a way to support them and support each other, which is again why I think we do these gatherings, is we understand what everyone needs, and as well as what everyone has so far, and what we want to do together. So I'm really excited to offer that to the children there, but as well as, again, bringing it into the community and integrating the young and the old as well. So that's what I'm going to be doing there.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, sure. As I said, I'm going to be focusing on the metaphysics of free will and the birthing of free will on Earth, and really from the standpoint of metaphysical activism, which is something that I often talk about, and that really does represent, this idea of bridging the private spiritual work we do with the everyday encounters and those sort of collisions we're having in our everyday life, really, really, truly bringing those together. So that's really the heart of metaphysical activism as I look at it, and I'm really interested in exploring this idea of free will entering humanity's manifestation capacity in this very, very subtle way, and what it means to become more subtle, and how that applies to everyday life. Like, how do we take this concept of subtle energies and subtle states of consciousness and take it out of the esoteric realm and into these, like you were saying, practical, efficient applications of our purpose here on Earth. So I'm going to be diving through a lot of that, and then I'm going to be offering a complimentary workshop, which is techniques for gazing at infinity, which is also has to do with subtlety. So learning how to refine the gaze into more subtle states. So how to apply your gaze with subtlety, both externally and internally. But there'll be more focus on how to gaze inwardly with subtlety, and how to, for example, apply your gaze to your heart very, very, very softly, and what it means to be able to do that. And, I found a lot of very interesting, very ancient teachings on this. Some of the oldest spiritual teachings on Earth talk about how to reverse the eyes and to use the eyes to gaze inwards into the human vessel. So I'm going to be exploring a lot of the techniques that I've been studying and developing for years and years on that. And so the workshop will be offering people that. We'll be doing that in a very interactive way with, I think, probably some flowers and some essential oils and things like that. And then also I'm going to be contributing to the kids offering. I'll be doing a kids yoga class, and it's going to be a theme and story-based yoga journey focused on heart, and just helping kids arrive into heart awareness. And that should be a lot of fun.
I can't wait.
And that's what I'm bringing. Yeah, it's gonna be good.
Oh, rad. I love that. I'm also really glad that our workshops are not at the same time, so I can see. I'm like, okay, good, because I really want to check that out. Very, very interesting. Cool. See, how about you?
Yeah, I'm just seeing how like this really cool cooperative team is coming together, and that's actually something that I've always wanted to see happen at an event, because in the past I've really felt like there's this, like, everybody's presenting on their own thing, and there's not like a unified intention or energy that's received or experienced by, oh, I'm breaking up. Oh, I'm back.
We got you.
Yeah, you're here. It's all good.
Yeah, a unified intention, so that we're actually creating a space to pull people through an entire experience. And what it feels like is almost like this Starseed Wanderer college that is forming, where people can come and actually really get activated and get more in tune with themselves, again, so that we can accelerate the timeline, because the only way that we're going to have full disclosure or have these things that we intellectually want, is to, get into this place of groundedness and to create it from this very organic and heartfelt and subtle way as we're talking about. So I'm going to be talking about like disclosure and the timeline of disclosure and how that actually interrelates with our personal work and our integration as starseeds. We'll be talking about accessing our multidimensional selves and the ways that we can begin to embody those aspects and trust those aspects and make space for them inside our body, that where we might still carry density. And on the second day, I'll be offering a sound healing ceremony, and I would love to share a little bit of sound healing at the end of our show. But the sound healing ceremony is definitely going to just be bringing those cosmic energies in and clearing these lower density energies out, and effectively also then doing that for our planet, because we're all connected and we're one organism.
Oh, rad. Thank you. And yes, please take us out with a thing in a little bit. I would love that. I was actually going to put you on the spot and ask you and hope that it wasn't awkward. So thank you for already saying that, because I was like, oh no, like what if that's not even a good idea, as I'm spitting on myself as I say it. Awesome. But yeah, all that said, yeah, thank you. So what am I going to be bringing to Camp Disclosure this year? First off, I'm deeply impressed by what you guys are offering. I've been kind of tracking and watching the process of the formation of it from like a distance, like checking in here and there, and I'm honestly shocked. I am shocked by the level of what I call just like ability and just like the capability and the level to which even just the people that are organizing this are incredibly tuned in to it. I think is a very, very necessary thing right now. That said, what am I doing at Camp Disclosure this year, you guys? We're doing essentially a two-part process. It takes place with a presentation on the first day in which we're looking at what's actually going on, just the generality with this thing we called ascension, the understanding of this thing called the frequency of truth, and just what's going on within the body during this very, very unique process, because that's just kind of like the frequency I have been tasked with teaching and sort of demonstrating to the world, the level to which we have like a control and ability, an actual, it's like an ancient version of us, like Simon was kind of talking about in a roundabout way. This other version of us is kind of surfacing at a very specific stage in our life. So we're doing a presentation on the true workings of, ascension. I call it a multidimensional briefing. Then we're also doing a workshop in which I'm going to be taking people through a very unique process of activating your own unique multidimensional healing abilities. It's one of the foundational experiences of this thing called fourth density. And so what we're doing is a workshop designed to help you guys actually clear your energy and learn what it feels like. What does real energy feel like? Because we're at this stage, I think everybody can agree, both the panelists and all the people watching this, in which coming to our own internal understanding of the non-physical energies and the level to which they're interacting with us in this world is more critical now than ever before, whether it's for, disclosure, for ascension, knowledge of self. But that said, so yeah, we're doing that workshop, which is also by donation for those of you guys that can show up there. This is the place to be this year. I'm deeply honored to be there. And so, yeah, campdisclosure.com. Thanks for putting the link in there. Is there anyone else wants to mention or throw in before we transition on out the door? Anybody at all? No, I don't hear anyone.
No, I'm excited. Camp Disclosure is going to be fun. One thing that I did see though, which was exciting, is a lot of the times these events are happening on the West Coast-ish of the North America, and now this is the first time where that energy and these people and grid workers and everything are all going to be gathering on the East Coast area, which to me I've been getting visions about for like a few years, and I'm like, it's almost like a big quilt or a blanket is being pulled across the country. So I just wanted to share that because I'm really excited to see, even with just putting our attentions there is really important, I think, to like, I don't know, integrate and change things and activate people and do what we need to do. It's already all set up. So we're just showing up, I think.
Totally. I think it's really important. I often have to remind myself how important it is where I'm physically brought to on the earth, that there's always something else going on energetically as to why I'm being brought to that place with my feet on that part of the earth.
Yeah.
It's never what I expect. Like, expectation has nothing to do with why I arrive in places. And I think that's what's really amazing, with this being, kind of rare for these events. that we're going to be boots on the ground there, and
Yep.
that's going to impact the planet in specific ways. You know, there's no way around it. So that part of it's really exciting. I can't wait to see what this portion of the earth feels like under my feet.
I love it.
Me too.
I will say one last thing, and then I'm going to let you take it out, Z. That said, you guys, I will mention once again, there are not too many opportunities like this in 2020. We are at the stage in which all you got to do is just open social media and look at your little timeline thing right there. The madness is everywhere. And a lot of us have been completely isolated in our own little capsule in this part of the world or wherever we are. And we are at the stage in which, in my opinion and experience, the human body needs renewal. It needs contact and it needs activation. And if you're capable, for all those that are able to answer this call, there's a large group of people gathering up this year out there on the East Coast. And so I encourage everyone, if you're capable, come get activated, come meet Soul Family, come hang out with everybody. Honestly, this is nothing. This is, in my opinion, what I'm seeing form is really nothing like any of the other conferences that any of, that I have been to. I don't know about you guys, but so I am deeply honored to be there. And I want to thank all of you guys for hanging out with us here today. Everybody on the live stream as well. We didn't get to too many of your questions, but we're going to be doing this again in the coming weeks. And so I will mention one more thing before we go, just in further alignment of this timeline shift that we're doing. Myself, Z, and a couple other really awesome practitioners, Eric Rains and Barbara Buck, are facilitating a huge free group energy clearing meditation on June 21st. It is 1 week from today at almost the same time as this. It's going to be about 1 p.m., I believe. On the West Coast. But what we're doing is we're going to be going through, once again, similar to this, but a multi-tiered process of clearing and meditating and working with your energy. So for all of those of you out there who have been isolated in your bubble, who need help, who need clearing, who need emotional clearing, please do join us for this very, very unique event that we're putting on. It's going to be live, free on Facebook and hopefully YouTube once again. But I just want to mention that. I will put the link in the description. And that said, Z, please take us out with whatever you have. Thank you for being here, by the way, as well. And yeah.
I
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I love that. And for everybody that has joined us, thank you so much for being here. We're going to come back next week and we're going to do a similar process. Especially thank you, Z. Thank you, Simon Essler and Alexis Buck. Once again, you guys, please do join us this year at campdisclosure.com, or excuse me, Camp Disclosure. Check out the links in the description. And yeah, please join us next week. We're going to be doing a really awesome ceremony and a healing and just something very similar to this, but with Eric Rains, with Barbara Buck, myself, and Z once again. So please join us. I love you all. And once again, this is Strange Communications in the Digital Realm. It's an accidental show that sort of got placed on me. So I hope you guys will join us in the future. And for everyone out there, we love you. Stay sane. And if you do anything today, please, guys, take off the mask and throw it away. I love you all, and take care of yourselves. Boom. Okay, guys, I think our